Hey, Focus Learners, welcome back to The Explainer. We are jumping right in today because we're looking at something that reads way less like a dry legal document and way more like a high-stakes corporate thriller. Seriously. Our source material is a heavily redacted Federal Trade Commission legal complaint, docket number 9365 for those keeping track. It is this wild, intricate look at a proposed merger between two massive corporations, STERIS and Synergy Health, and honestly, the incredible lengths companies might go to just to maintain a monopoly. Buckle up, because the implications of this document literally affect almost every single hospital in the United States. So let's start with a really vital question. How exactly do you kill every single microorganism on a medical device before it ever reaches a patient? We're talking orthopedic implants, liquid-filled syringes, surgical stents, the heavy-duty stuff. The FDA strictly requires that these products be completely sterilized before use. No exceptions. It is this massive hidden bottleneck in the global healthcare supply chain. Basically, if you can't sterilize the device, you cannot sell it. And for the companies manufacturing these critical, often super dense medical devices, they rely heavily on third-party contract sterilizers to actually get the job done.
Now, to really get the drama here, we've got to understand the tech. And the market is currently split by a classic Goldilocks problem. On one side, you've got gamma radiation. Gamma uses a highly radioactive isotope called cobalt-60. It's powerful, it can penetrate deep into large, dense pallets of products. But it is slow. A typical turnaround time is like 3 to 4 days. Then on the other side, you have E-beam radiation. E-beam is basically a high-powered electric accelerator. It is incredibly fast, knocking out sterilization in minutes, and you can literally just flip it on and off with a switch. But here's the catch. It has very shallow penetration. You absolutely cannot put a massive, dense pallet in an E-beam machine. You've got to break everything down into tiny boxes, about the size of a copy paper box. So for a ton of heavy medical devices, E-beam just doesn't cut it.
Right, so you're probably thinking, come on, there's got to be a workaround, right? Well, unfortunately, hospitals and manufacturers are essentially trapped. What about ethylene oxide, or EO gas? Yeah, it's highly toxic, poisonous to humans, and can actually leave a carcinogenic residue on the product. Plus, it needs breathable packaging just so the gas can flow through. Okay, what about bringing gamma sterilization in-house? Well, the FTC notes that only the absolute largest medical device manufacturers produce the massive volume you'd need to justify the huge upfront investment of building your own radioactive gamma facility. And as we just talked about, E-beam simply cannot penetrate those dense materials. So, long story short, if you make dense medical products, you are stuck using contract gamma sterilization. Okay, let's dive into what happens when there are no viable alternatives. The market gets incredibly tight. According to the FTC complaint, the U.S. market for contract gamma sterilization is an absolute duopoly. There are exactly two major players. That's it. STERIS, which runs 14 gamma facilities in the U.S., and Sterigenics, which also operates 14 facilities. Because there's no other way to handle dense medical products, these two companies completely control the deep penetration market. And you know how this goes. When you only have two options, those two companies get to completely dictate pricing and turnaround times. They leave healthcare manufacturers with practically zero leverage. To really measure the sheer power of this duopoly, the FTC uses this vital economic concept called SSINIP. It stands for a small but significant and non-transitory increase in price. It's a classic antitrust tool. Basically, the FTC argues that if STERIS or Sterigenics were to implement an SSINIP, let's say slightly jacking up prices for an extended period, they would be highly profitable. Why? Because customers literally have nowhere else to go. They can't switch to E-beam, they definitely can't afford to build their own facilities, they are entirely locked in. But enter our narrative hero, or, the massive threat to this cozy little duopoly, a company called Synergy Health plc. Synergy is a publicly traded company based over in the UK. Back in 2014, they were actually the third largest sterilization company globally, pulling in about $590 million in revenue. But inside the United States, they were a pretty small player, mostly because they only offered E-beam and EO gas services. They didn't have any gamma facilities in the US. However, Synergy was plotting to change all of that. They were gearing up to drop a massively disruptive new technology right into the American market. That technology? X-ray sterilization. An X-ray is literally the ultimate just right weapon to disrupt the status quo here. It combines the absolute best features of both existing technologies. You get the deep penetration of gamma, meaning it handles those large pallets of dense medical devices no problem. But you also get the fast turnaround time of E-beam, and it gets better, Because it uses high-powered electricity to generate the X-rays, it completely eliminates the need to source radioactive cobalt-60. That removes huge environmental and regulatory headaches. It could even process multiple products with completely different dose requirements in the exact same cycle. Cleaner, faster, and just as powerful. A total game changer. And the FTC proves Synergy wasn't just daydreaming about this. They were a very real, imminent threat moving at lightning speed. Look at the timeline. In 2012, after buying an X-ray facility in Switzerland, Synergy's CEO starts planning a U.S. launch. By April 2013, the CEO is formally presenting this exact X-ray strategy to the board and at a major leadership conference. Fast forward a bit to September 2014, and the plan shifts into full reality. Synergy's team actually secured an exclusive 10-year agreement with a supplier to provide this X-ray tech for the United States. They were locking in their advantage and getting ready to strike. The intense secrecy around this plan is honestly so obvious right in the FTC complaint, which is just covered in heavy black redactions. While we don't know the exact names and locations hiding behind all those black bars, the context tells a super clear story. Synergy knew exactly how many sites it was going to build and exactly whose customers they were going to target. The FTC states that Synergy concluded their X-ray entry would have a direct, hard-hitting competitive impact on U.S. gamma providers, specifically Steris and Sterigenics. This was a highly concealed, targeted corporate strategy meant to totally shake up a billion-dollar market. And building this business case wasn't just internal corporate chatter either. By August and September of 2014, Synergy's team had actively gone out and procured letters of interest, LOIs, from major customers. Healthcare manufacturers were officially raising their hands and signaling, yes, we want this X-ray service. They presented a formal business case to Synergy's senior executive board on September 17, 2014. Customers were hungry for a faster, radiation-free alternative to the Steris and Sterigenics gamma monopoly, which made Synergy's entry practically inevitable. To quantify exactly what this meant for the market, the FTC brings in the Herfindahl-Hirschman Index, or HHI. It's a standard metric for market concentration. Under normal merger guidelines, any market with an HHI over 2,500 is considered highly concentrated. Basically, it's a market dominated by a few giants. Well, the FTC calculated that the U.S. gamma sterilization market was already way above this threshold. But according to Synergy's own internal projections, launching your X-ray facilities would have drastically dropped this HHI number by hundreds of points in key local markets. It would have fundamentally deconcentrated the monopoly and driven down prices for consumers. And then we reached the climax of our thriller. On October 13, 2014, literally just weeks after Synergy presented its final business case to its board, and right after securing that exclusive equipment agreement, Steris stepped in. Steris announced an agreement to acquire Synergy in a massive transaction valued at $1.9 billion. Yeah. Right as the ultimate disruptor was literally at the gates, the largest gamma provider in the country just pulled out their checkbook and bought them out. The absolutely crucial point here is how the FTC interprets this acquisition. They impartially state that if consummated, the merger would, quote, allow Steris to insulate itself against this competitive threat, which would have targeted Steris and Sterigenics' customers and resulted in lower prices, improved quality, and increased choice. The FTC alleges that this wasn't just some standard business synergy. It was a $1.9 billion kill switch. The whole acquisition was designed to completely eliminate a massive competitive threat before X-ray technology could ever even reach U.S. hospitals. But wait, there is a fascinating twist. In January 2015, the FTC caught wind of this whole thing and issued a second request for information, heavily scrutinizing the X-ray plans. Well, suddenly, Synergy's executives started scrambling. The head of Synergy's sterilization business abruptly claimed that customers were actually no longer interested in X-ray as an alternative to gamma, and actively began pivoting the narrative. The FTC explicitly alleges that Synergy was deliberately trying to claim X-ray was no longer viable, purely as a pretext to salvage their massive sale to Steris. Now you might ask, well, if X-ray is so great, won't someone else just build it? The FTC makes it very clear why this specific merger matters so much. Literally, no other company could step in and replace Synergy's disruptive potential. Synergy had massive global scale, an existing reputation for quality, and most importantly, they had already locked down that 10-year exclusive agreement with the world's only supplier of commercially viable X-ray sterilization machines. Any other potential entrants, they're just small-scale e-beam providers who completely lack the power, the capital, and the technical expertise to launch a nationwide X-ray network that could actually compete with Steris's gamma facilities. Synergy was an absolute unicorn. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of today's explainer. When a duopoly controls a critical bottleneck in healthcare, that lack of competition directly affects the cost and efficiency of medical care for all of us. This legal complaint really pulls back the curtain on how massive corporations might view disruptive innovation, not as a tool to improve the industry, but as a direct threat that needs to be purchased and neutralized. It leaves us with a really provocative question to consider regarding the hidden costs of corporate consolidation. Should a merger be allowed to kill a transformative technology before it even reaches the market? Thanks for joining me today, Focus Learners. Keep asking the tough questions, and I'll see you in the next explainer.